Hello, Jonathan Pierce was Sydney's untouchable king. At just 36, he owned luxury penthouses with sweeping views of the Opera House, sprawling estates on the Gold Coast, and entire blocks of high-rise apartments in Melbourne. His name filled business pages, his arrogance filled boardrooms, and his money bought him everything except genuine affection. Martha Williams, on the other hand, lived a life worlds apart. A nurse in a busy Melbourne hospital. She had fought her way through nursing school on a scholarship program. She didn't have time for social media, designer clothes, or dating. Her cheap floral perfume clung to her uniform, and her cracked phone screen was only good for making quick calls. Her world was about duty, not glamour. One autumn night, Jonathan's world collided with hers. A sudden collapse at a gala in Sydney left him dangerously weak. He was rushed into a private unit at the hospital where Martha worked. When she walked in to administer his medication, Jonathan expected recognition. He was used to stares, gasps, and whispered awe. But Martha's eyes remained calm, detached, professional. To her, he wasn't Australia's most arrogant billionaire, he was just bed 9. She listened to his complaints, adjusted his IV, and told him firmly, "You'll recover faster if you rest." Jonathan couldn't believe it. A woman who didn't care who he was? A woman who smelled of cheap perfume yet carried herself with quiet dignity? For the first time in years, he felt human. And that terrified him. But in the days that followed, as she cared for him without judgment or fear, it also made him hungry for something he couldn't buy. Her heart. Jonathan slept better that night than he had in weeks. For the first time in a long while, it wasn't wealth, power, or influence that brought him peace, it was Martha. Her quiet presence, the way she adjusted his pillows without fuss, and the way she spoke to him as if he were simply a man in need of care, not Sydney's most arrogant billionaire, settled something deep within him. The next morning, Martha clocked out from her night shift, her tired face lit with the faintest smile. Jonathan almost asked her not to leave, but she disappeared before he could find the words. Cassie, the next nurse on duty, arrived soon after. Unlike Martha, Cassie was cautious around him. She whispered politely, kept her distance, and seemed nervous because of the rumors. Jonathan caught the subtle change immediately. Her touch was professional, but not warm. Her eyes carried recognition of who he was, and that recognition built a wall between them. The moment Cassie left the room, Jonathan gave strict instructions to the head nurse. Only Martha should tend to me until I'm discharged. When Martha returned later that evening, Jonathan watched her closely, expecting some shift in her behavior. He imagined Cassie or the others must have told her the truth about him. Surely now, she would act differently, maybe even try to impress him. But Martha was the same. She checked his IV, noted his vitals, and spoke to him with calm detachment. Jonathan's brows furrowed. How could she not know? Or worse, how could she know, and still not care? What Jonathan didn't realize was that Martha was very much an outsider among her colleagues. Her poverty set her apart. She never joined the after-shift dinners, never bought expensive coffee with the others, and rarely engaged in their gossip. Her life was too busy for luxury, too burdened for idle chatter. To them, she was invisible. And because of that, Martha remained untouched by the whispers of Jonathan Pierce's name. To her, he was just another patient in bed 9. And to him, that made her all the more impossible to ignore. Jonathan had always built walls around his heart walls, reinforced by betrayal, greed, and the shallow affections of women who wanted only his name, his power, or his money. He was used to the way people treated him, either with fear, with awe, or with ambition in their eyes, never with sincerity. That's why Martha confused him. Day after day she came into his room, professional and polite, never lingering a second longer than needed. She never came late, never stayed beyond her shift, and never once tried to impress him. Her cheap perfume lingered in the air, her uniform always neat, her voice calm. Jonathan began to watch her more closely, not just as a patient, but as a man longing to understand. One evening, unable to hold back, Jonathan asked quietly, "Martha, what's your story?" She looked at him, surprised, then sat down by his bed. Her words came simply, without self-pity. She told him how her family had nothing to their name, how she had survived school only because of a scholarship, and how she now worked tirelessly to support herself and her younger sister. Her eyes shone with gratitude for the little she had, and with determination for the life she was building. Jonathan listened in silence. For once, he wasn't the billionaire, and she wasn't just his nurse. She was a woman who had fought battles he had never faced. When she clocked out that night, Jonathan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't shake her words, nor the quiet strength she carried. Martha had carved out a space in his guarded heart, not because she was poor, but because she was real, determined, untouched by the greed that had always surrounded him. And that terrified him more than anything. Jonathan found himself anticipating each shift Martha worked. Her calm footsteps, her careful hands, her unshakable professionalism, it was a rhythm he had come to crave. On his last night in the hospital, as she adjusted his IV for the final time, he surprised himself by blurting out, "Martha, have dinner with me." She blinked, unsure if she heard correctly. "It's nothing formal," he added quickly, hiding the nervous edge in his voice. "I just want to say thank you." For Martha, it was uncharted territory. She had never been to dinner with anyone outside her family, never been courted, never been seen. After a long pause, she gave a shy nod. "All right." Jonathan was discharged the next morning, and then nothing. Days bled into weeks. He threw himself back into work, boardrooms and skyscrapers swallowing his hours. Martha told herself she had imagined the spark. Of course he hadn't meant it. Men like him never meant things with women like her. "He's wealthy. Out of my class," she reminded herself. "Don't expect anything." Then, one evening, she returned home after a long shift to find a sleek package on her doorstep. Inside lay a stunning dinner dress, unlike anything she had ever owned. Beneath it, a card with a handwritten note. "Friday night, 8 p.m., the Harbor View. I'll be waiting. Jay." Her heart raced. But panic followed just as quickly. The dinner was the very next night, and she was on duty. She didn't even know how to contact him. For the first time, Martha swallowed her pride and pleaded with a colleague to swap shifts. At first, her colleague rolled her eyes and muttered, "Why should I?" But after a long silence, she finally sighed and said, "Fine, just this once." Martha clutched the dress against her chest, her pulse quickening. For the first time in years, she was stepping into a world she didn't belong to. And she had no idea if her heart was ready. Martha's breath caught as she stepped into the restaurant. The glittering chandeliers, polished marble floors, and crystal glasses shimmered under soft golden lights. Everything in the seven-star dining hall whispered of wealth and class. She had never seen such beauty, not even in pictures. Her eyes found Jonathan almost instantly. He stood from his table the moment he saw her, his expression softening. Dressed in a tailored black suit, he looked every bit the billionaire, yet his gaze held something gentler. He pulled out her chair, and she sat, trying not to stare too much at the cutlery gleaming before her. She knew how to use a fork and knife, but years of eating toast and coffee on the go had made her clumsy. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to keep pace with him. Jonathan noticed her discomfort and leaned closer. "Don't pretend for me," he murmured with a smile. "Be yourself." Relieved, Martha set the cutlery down and ate the way she was used to. Jonathan's lips curved in a faint smile, admiration flickering in his eyes. She wasn't trying to impress him, and that was exactly what drew him in. After dinner, she thanked him shyly for the dress and for keeping his promise. As she gathered her things, Jonathan insisted on driving her home. She agreed it was late, and the streets were dark. But when they pulled up to her modest apartment building, Jonathan's chest tightened. The peeling paint, the narrow stairways, the faint hum of a broken streetlight, it was worlds away from his penthouse overlooking Sydney Harbor. He said nothing, but the weight of what he saw lingered with him long after she closed her door with a quiet smile. The next day, work resumed as usual. Martha slipped back into her uniform, Jonathan back into boardrooms and skyscrapers. Yet her face never left his thoughts. He had told himself not to push, not to overwhelm her until he was certain. So, he began with small gifts, flowers, books, little tokens of gratitude she accepted politely. But one afternoon, Martha's world shifted. A luxurious designer bag arrived at the hospital for her. She opened it, unaware, until her colleagues gasped in envy and told her its worth. Her face flushed with unease. Without hesitation, she marched it back to the courier with a note. "Thank you, but unnecessary." When Jonathan read her reply, shock rippled through him. That bag had been meant as her birthday gift, sent early because he would be away. Yet she had returned it, without hesitation. And instead of anger, something deeper stirred in him. Martha was unlike anyone he had ever known. The week passed in silence. Jonathan buried himself in meetings and deals, too busy to chase explanations about the returned gift. Yet, in the quiet moments between boardrooms, her face drifted into his thoughts. She's not like the others. Martha, on the other hand, carried the weight of doubt. Had she offended him? Was she foolish to send back something he had chosen for her? But pride and dignity held her back. She promised herself, if he doesn't reach out, I won't chase. We're not of the same class anyway. Her 25th birthday arrived quietly, almost unnoticed. She finished her hospital shift, her feet aching, her mind heavy. Even her younger sister had forgotten to call. Martha told herself excuses, people were busy. People forgot, but a small ache still pressed against her chest. Then, outside the hospital, a sleek, black luxury car idled by the curb. The tinted window lowered, and there he was, Jonathan Pierce. "Come with me," he said simply, his tone soft, almost vulnerable. She hesitated, then slid into the car. The drive was quiet, the hum of the city fading as they pulled into his penthouse overlooking Sydney Harbor. From the first step inside, Martha was stunned. Crystal lights, white marble floors, wide glass walls opening to the skyline, everything felt like stepping into another world. Jonathan led her to a guest room. "Freshen up," he said, handing her a maroon gown that shimmered like wine under the lights. And Martha, this time, without the smell of disinfectants. "Last time, you smelled of the hospital." His tone was teasing, not cruel. Flustered, she nodded. When she emerged minutes later in the gown, her hair brushed out, Jonathan couldn't hide his smile. She looked radiant. Dinner was intimate, quiet, and peaceful. A small cake waited at the table. Martha's eyes glistened. She hadn't had a birthday cake since she was 5. And now, 20 years later, here she was, sharing one with the most powerful man in the city. Afterwards, they sat together on a white couch, glasses of red wine in hand. Jonathan leaned closer, pressing a gentle kiss to her cheek. "Happy birthday, dear," he whispered. Her chest tightened. The words felt heavier than the kiss. Is this real? Or just a dream I'll wake up from? Gathering courage, Martha asked softly, "Jonathan, you know so much about me. But who are you, really?" His smile was faint, guarded. "There's not much to tell. I was born into privilege, yes, but I worked to build more. Business, wealth, power, that's my world. It's what everyone sees, but very few care about me beyond that." Martha studied him in silence, then gave a small nod. She understood. He wasn't a man eager to open his heart. but even in those few words, she saw the loneliness behind his empire. Then Jonathan brought up the bag. "Why return it?" She explained softly. "My colleagues told me it's worth. It wasn't necessary. I don't want to be mistaken for someone I'm not." Jonathan laughed lightly. "Even if you're not wealthy, don't go around looking like your problem, Martha." Her smile was calm, unwavering. "Wealth doesn't define a person. Who you are is who you are, aside from the money. I don't like to pretend." Jonathan's gaze lingered, his arrogance melting for once. "Then tell me, Martha, who are you?" She smiled faintly and shook her head. "Who I am," she said softly, "is left for you to find out." The answer struck him more deeply than she knew. It wasn't pride, it wasn't distance, it was mystery and honesty all at once. Jonathan found himself wanting more. Her laughter, her secrets, her touch. For a fleeting second, he almost leaned in to kiss her fully, to claim what his heart demanded. But fear tugged at him. If he moved too quickly, he could lose the very thing that made her different. So, instead, he drove her home. Outside her modest apartment, he paused, his hand brushing hers before leaning in. His lips met hers gently in a peck, soft, careful, unfinished. "I'll call you when I get home," he murmured. Martha's heart fluttered. She smiled, nodding, but as she closed the door behind her, her thoughts swirled. Was this love or something else? If only he would put a name to it. The days that followed were filled with distance. Jonathan was consumed with his empire, juggling deals and deadlines. They barely had time to see each other. Yet, somehow, he always checked in. A short call between meetings, a text after midnight, even just a quick, "Did you eat?" Each message lit up Martha's heart. Each call made her day brighter. Slowly, without her realizing, she began to fall. For Jonathan, the feeling was even deeper. For the first time in his life, love didn't feel like a transaction or an arrangement. With Martha, he was certain this wasn't about wealth. This was something rare, something real. A few weeks later, it was Martha who sent the message. "Are you free tonight?" Jonathan surprised himself by clearing his schedule. "Yes, I'll be there." He waited outside the hospital just as her shift ended. She stepped out, tired but glowing, her simple scrubs clinging to the soft evening breeze. Jonathan opened the door of his car, ready to whisk her away, but she stopped him with a small smile. "Step out. I don't want to sit in a car tonight. Let's walk." He hesitated. Jonathan Pierce didn't walk in public, but something in her voice made him comply. Pulling a face cap low over his eyes, he stepped out and joined her. They began walking, hand in hand, down the quiet Sydney street as the city lights blinked on. Martha led him to a small street vendor, the kind Jonathan had never been near in his adult life. She ordered 2 snacks, wrapped in greasy paper. "I can't eat this," Jonathan said, wrinkling his nose. "It's too greasy, and you shouldn't eat too much either." Martha laughed, biting into hers. "I haven't had this in a long while. You should try it." He took a bite, his face softening. "It's good," he admitted, though not quite his taste. She laughed again, and for a moment they were just 2 people on a sidewalk, not Billionaire and Nurse. As they walked, Martha's eyes caught a massive billboard glowing above the street. A model smiled down from it, wearing luxury clothes. Martha whispered, almost to herself, "One day, I want to be on a billboard like that, to feel like I've achieved something." Then she looked closer. The man on the billboard wasn't a model, it was Jonathan, his face larger than life, staring down at her with the word Piers Holdings in bold letters. Something inside her went quiet. The laughter faded. "His world isn't mine," she thought. "What am I even doing?" Jonathan noticed the shift immediately. He stopped walking and turned to her, his hand warm on hers. "Martha," he said quietly, "don't let that change anything. You're all I want." She blinked at him, unsure. "I like you," Jonathan said, his voice firm, vulnerable. "I love you, and I want you all to myself. Don't let what you've seen take that away from us." For the first time, the billionaire didn't look like a king of Sydney. He looked like a man asking for a chance. And under the glow of the billboard, Martha realized she was standing at the edge of something bigger than she'd ever imagined, bigger than either of their worlds. Jonathan called his driver that night, instructing him to pick them up at the very spot where he had confessed his feelings to Martha. As the car pulled away, Jonathan sat in silence, stealing glances at her. He had never confessed to anyone so openly, and deep down, he hoped what he said wouldn't scare her away. Martha, on the other hand, leaned against the window, her thoughts spinning. She was already in love, but what she had seen the billboard, his name glowing over Sydney, was too heavy to ignore. Back at her apartment, she lay awake replaying the evening. Her heart wanted him, but her mind whispered caution. His world was gold and glass, hers was plain walls and quiet nights. Could love survive such a difference? Weeks passed without a word from Martha. Jonathan fought the urge to reach out every day, but he restrained himself. He knew she needed time to either accept him or walk away. Still, the silence ate at him. One faithful evening, he gave in. Parking in front of her apartment, he waited until she stepped outside. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. Then Martha, her voice steady but her heart racing, broke the silence. "Jonathan, I've thought about this. I know who you are, and I know your world. And I can only be with you on two conditions." Jonathan straightened, every muscle tense. "First," she said firmly, "I need to be sure you won't change me. I am who I am, and I don't want to lose that just to fit into your world." He nodded slowly, listening. "Second," she added, her gaze holding his, "you're not permitted to get involved in my work or try to control that part of my life. Nursing is mine. My independence is mine." For a moment, Jonathan said nothing. Then a smile tugged at his lips. "And if I agree?" he asked softly. Martha's lips curved, hesitant but hopeful. "Then I'm fine being with you." Jonathan exhaled, relief washing through him. He reached for her hand, holding it tightly. It wasn't a perfect union yet. It was fragile, uncertain, built on conditions. But for Jonathan Pierce, the man who thought he could never be loved beyond his wealth, it was everything. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Martha had known. Jonathan showered her with a kind of love that wasn't loud, but steady, thoughtful gestures, quiet phone calls in between meetings, little surprises that reminded her she was seen. He never pushed her too far into his glittering world, but little by little, he introduced her to pieces of it. At the same time, he learned from her how to walk down busy streets without bodyguards, how to share a snack without pretense, how to laugh without performance. Her colleagues noticed the subtle changes. Martha's steps grew lighter, her face brighter. She began wearing soft touches of makeup, her uniform paired with a new elegance. A delicate designer perfume clung to her Jonathan's gift. Whispers floated in the hospital corridors. Some remembered the luxurious bag she once returned, and though no one dared ask, they suspected Martha was no longer the same girl they thought they knew. One evening, as she lay curled against Jonathan on his sleek white couch, he stroked her hair and said softly, "Martha, I'd love you to meet my parents. Don't worry, they're warm people. They'll like you." Her heart skipped, but she nodded. Things were moving fast, but strangely, she was okay with it. The following Sunday was bright and sunny. Jonathan drove her to his parents' estate, a sprawling home by the coast, filled with light and laughter. His parents welcomed her warmly, impressed by her simplicity and quiet strength. They chatted, laughed, and for a moment Martha felt the ease of belonging. But just as they were preparing to leave, Jonathan's mother asked to speak with him privately. Martha stayed behind politely, sipping tea. "Jonathan," his father said gravely once they were alone, "we need to tell you something. Isabella is back in the country." The name froze him, his chest tightened. Isabella. His first love. The woman he once thought he would marry. The fashion designer who had chosen ambition overseas over their life together. He had pleaded with her to stay, but she had walked away without looking back. Now, she was back. Jonathan clenched his jaw. "Her presence changes nothing," he said firmly. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "Isabella is history. That's all she is to me now." Yet as he walked back to Martha, her laughter floating from the garden, a chill whispered in the back of his mind. Some ghosts had a way of returning at the worst possible time. When Jonathan met Martha's parents, the meeting was humble and intimate. He sat in their small living room, listening respectfully, answering questions with sincerity. After he left, Martha's parents turned to her, their eyes filled with both pride and worry. "Martha, are you sure?" her mother asked gently. "His world is not your world." Martha smiled, her heart certain. "Yes, Mama, I'm sure." Not long after, Jonathan began talking about marriage. His eagerness both thrilled and overwhelmed her, but when the discussion of a wedding arose, Martha was clear. "I want a small wedding," she told him one evening as they sat together. "I don't want to just be known as your wife. I want to have my own place in the world, Jonathan. My own name." He studied her, then nodded with quiet admiration. "If you want it simple, simple it will be. I'll honor that." For a while, everything seemed settled, until the day Martha went to choose her wedding dress. She entered a sleek boutique in the city, unaware that the sign above the door carried the name of Jonathan's past, Isabella. The moment Isabella spotted her, recognition flickered in her eyes. She had already heard the whispers. Curiosity and perhaps something sharper had driven her to do her own little investigation. Now here Martha stood, radiant with the quiet glow of love. "Welcome," Isabella said smoothly, her voice sweet as honey. "I'll help you find the perfect dress." Martha, unaware of the hidden sting, smiled gratefully. The two women moved through the racks, fingers brushing lace and silk. Isabella's eye for fashion was sharp, and she guided Martha to a gown that fit like a dream. But as Martha admired herself in the mirror, Isabella stepped closer, her words low and deliberate. "You know, Jonathan, he likes to be in control. At first, it feels like love. But soon, you'll see he won't let you breathe. He won't let you be." Martha froze, her reflection blurring in the glass. Isabella's tone was gentle, persuasive, as though she were doing her a favor. "Leave before it's too late," Isabella whispered, brushing an imaginary speck of dust from the dress. "Trust me, I know him better than anyone. You won't understand until the wedding is over." Martha's heart pounded. She forced a smile, thanked Isabella, and walked out with the dress bag in her hand. But as she stepped into the street, the echo of Isabella's words clung to her. And for the first time, doubt crept into her joy. That evening, Martha sat across from Jonathan in his penthouse, the dress bag resting quietly in the corner. Her fingers fidgeted with the rim of her glass, her eyes searching his face. "Jonathan," she began carefully. "I met someone today, at the boutique. She helped me with my dress." Jonathan looked up from his wine, immediately alert. "Who?" She said her name was Isabella. For a moment, the name struck him like a stone. His jaw tightened, his glass stilled midair. The last face he wanted mingling with their future was hers. Jonathan set the glass down slowly, meeting Martha's steady gaze. "Martha, listen to me." His voice was calm, but beneath it, there was steel. "Isabella was my past. Years ago, I thought I loved her. She chose to leave me and Australia for her career, I begged her to stay, but she walked away without hesitation. Whatever she told you today, it's nothing but poison. She doesn't matter anymore. Martha reached across the table, laying her hand over his. Her eyes softened. I'm not scared, Jonathan. I just wanted you to know. I wanted you to hear it from me. His chest loosened at her words. She wasn't shaken, wasn't running. She was standing her ground beside him. Jonathan exhaled and squeezed her hand firmly. Nothing changes between us. You're my present. You're my future. That's all that matters. Martha smiled, her lips curving with quiet certainty. Then let's move forward. Together. In that moment, the shadow of Isabella seemed smaller, her whispers dull against the steady heartbeat of something far stronger love that wasn't built on wealth, power, or fear, but on truth. The wedding was everything Martha had dreamed of, simple, yet touched with Jonathan's quiet luxury. A small gathering, a modest church, flowers arranged in soft whites and pastels. There were no screaming tabloids, no flashing paparazzi lights, just laughter, joy, and the warmth of two families becoming one. Jonathan had kept his promise. If Martha wanted it simple, simple it would be. When she moved into his penthouse afterwards, Jonathan discovered a joy he hadn't expected. No grand parties, no endless company, just Martha waiting for him after long days with a warm meal and an even warmer smile. He found himself running home earlier and earlier, craving the peace only she could give him. Martha, too, was blossoming. Her career advanced steadily. Her colleagues began to respect her growth, and Jonathan supported her without ever interfering. Misunderstandings came, as they do in every marriage, but they learned to manage them with honesty, choosing love over pride. One evening, months later, they sat together on the balcony of their penthouse. Martha, her hand resting on her small but growing belly, leaned against Jonathan's shoulder. In her other hand, she held a glass of fresh juice. Jonathan brushed a kiss over her hair. I don't need the whole world anymore, he whispered. Just you, Martha. Just us. Martha smiled, her eyes drifting upward, and there it was. A glowing billboard lit up the Sydney skyline. But this time, it wasn't Jonathan's face smiling down. It was hers. Not as his wife. Not as Mrs. Pierce, but as Martha Williams for her own achievements, her own hard work. Tears welled in her eyes. Jonathan tightened his arm around her as she whispered, I told you, I didn't want wealth to define me. And it never did, he replied softly. They leaned into each other, the city lights sparkling before them, their hearts full not because of penthouses or power, but because they had found something richer, love that truly belonged to them both. The end.